For about 90 seconds, Iran believed they were through. In a hotel and in homes across Tijuana, players, staff, and supporters watched the screen, showing a different match in a different city, and saw Algeria score a stoppage-time goal that would have sent Iran into the round of 32. There were reports of celebrations breaking out, relief, disbelief, joy, all of it arriving at once after a month of football that had tested this team in ways no other nation at this World Cup had to face. And then, on the very next play, it was gone. This is a story of the cruelest possible way to be eliminated from a World Cup. A team that did everything it could on its own pitch, only to have its fate decided somewhere else entirely, in the final seconds of someone else's match. And for Iran, this wasn't just a football heartbreak. It was the ending to a tournament that had already given the squad more to carry than almost any team in the history of the competition. So, what actually happened on that final group stage night? And why did Iran's own response to their elimination end up saying more about this team than the result itself? Let's start with the math, because the situation Iran found themselves in heading into that final match day was genuinely complicated. The kind of multi-team scenario that turns a quiet Saturday night into pure chaos for everyone trying to follow it. Iran finished their own group stage campaign with 3 points, 3 draws, a result against Belgium, a result against New Zealand, and a result against Egypt that we covered in detail on this channel, the one decided by that brutally tight VAR offside call in the 94th minute. No wins, no losses, just 3 draws and 3 points. A campaign defined by resilience, without ever quite finding the breakthrough this team needed. That left Iran's fate completely out of their own hands by the time their own fixtures were finished. Their path into the knockout rounds now depended entirely on what happened in a different group, in a different match, between 2 teams who had absolutely no obligation to do Iran any favors at all. Algeria and Austria played their own group finale on Saturday night, and the stakes for that match were just as significant as anything happening anywhere else in the tournament that day. Algeria had been chasing their own piece of World Cup history, while Austria, who finished second behind Argentina in that group, were fighting to advance for the first time since 1982, a drought stretching back, well over 4 decades for Austrian football. Here's where things get genuinely dramatic, because this wasn't a cynical, half-hearted match, the way some feared it might be, given what a draw would mean for both sides involved. The match was tied 2-2 heading into the closing minutes, and Algeria looked, for a stretch, content to simply run out the clock and settle for the point. Then, with about a minute left in stoppage time, Algeria's captain Riyad Mahrez scored his second goal of the match, finishing off a perfect cross to put Algeria ahead 3-2. In that exact moment, Iran's path into the knockout rounds opened up completely. A 3-2 Algeria win, with Austria eliminated, would have sent Iran through on tiebreakers. That's the moment celebrations reportedly broke out around Iran's camp in Tijuana, the team that had crossed the border before and after every single one of its matches, that had its ticket allocation pulled days before the tournament even began, that had been managed under entry restrictions no other federation at this World Cup had to deal with, suddenly found itself on the verge of the knockout stage through no action of its own at all, just by watching a screen. It lasted moments. Sasa Kalajic headed in an equalizing goal for Austria almost immediately afterward, leveling the match at 3-3 on the game's final play. The final whistle blew on that scoreline, and in an instant, the door that had cracked open for Iran slammed shut again. Austria's draw was enough to send them through to the knockout stage alongside Algeria. Iran, despite finishing their own campaign with the same level of football, the same 3 draws, the same grit shown across every single one of their matches, was out. This matters because it captures something genuinely unique and genuinely cruel about how football works at this level. Iran did not lose their place in the tournament because of anything they did wrong on the pitch in their own matches. They lost it because of what 2 completely separate teams did in the final 90 seconds of a different match, 600 miles away, in a scenario that had nothing to do with Iran's own performance at all. There's a deeper historical layer to that Algeria-Austria match that's worth understanding too, because it adds real weight to why that game in particular carried so much tension. Algeria supporters have been waiting 44 years for a specific kind of redemption. Back at the 1982 World Cup, Austria and West Germany were accused of essentially stopping competing once West Germany took an early 1-0 lead, because that exact result guaranteed both nations would advance at Algeria's direct expense. Algeria protested to FIFA at the time. The protest changed nothing. They were eliminated anyway, in what's been remembered in football history as one of the sport's most notorious examples of two teams conspiring, even informally, against a third. So there was real curiosity heading into this 2026 rematch of circumstances, a worry in some corners that history might repeat itself, that both sides might quietly settle for the draw that would send them both through at Iran's expense, the same way it happened in 1982. Instead, the crowd of over 69,000 inside the stadium got a genuinely thrilling final half hour, with Marko Arnautovic opening the scoring for Austria, Belalai equalizing for Algeria right before halftime, Marcel Sabitzer restoring Austria's lead, and then that incredible final exchange between Mars and Kalajic in the dying seconds. It wasn't a fix. It wasn't a quiet, contended draw. It was a genuinely dramatic football match. And the brutal irony for Iran is that the honesty and the competitive spirit both teams showed, the very thing that should be celebrated in the sport, is exactly what ended their own tournament. Now, here's where this story becomes about something much bigger than one group stage tiebreaker, because Iran's elimination wasn't really the end of their story. It was the moment that revealed exactly what kind of tournament this team had actually been living through. We've covered extensively on this channel what Iran's squad endured just to compete in this World Cup. Their request to base their entire training camp not in the United States, but in Mexico, specifically in Tijuana, was something Iran's federation actually sought out in March, given the diplomatic relationship between Iran and Mexico. Their request to shift that base camp was granted only 2 weeks before the team's actual arrival, an incredibly tight window for relocating an entire national team operation across an international border. For their first 2 matches, played near Los Angeles, the team was not permitted to travel into the United States until a day before each fixture and had to return immediately back across the border to Mexico after the final whistle in both games. No extended preparation window, no settling into a city, just cross, play, cross back, repeat. At their very first match, the human complexity of the situation was on full display before a ball had even been kicked. Several hundred Iranian Americans protested outside the stadium, calling for change inside Iran and waving the pre-revolutionary lion and sun flag, while thousands more supporters poured into the stadium specifically to watch their team play. The pre-game national anthem was met with a mix of both cheers and boos from inside that same crowd, a genuinely rare and complicated moment for any team walking out a World Cup, let alone one already managing every other obstacle being placed in front of it. And then there's a detail that, more than any result on the pitch, tells you who this group of players and staff actually were by the time their tournament ended. After Iran's elimination was confirmed on Saturday night, the team's response wasn't anger. It wasn't a statement focused on the unfairness of needing another team's result to go their way, or frustration directed at the travel restrictions and ticket issues that had defined so much of their tournament experience. Instead, the team sent out a message of pure gratitude, directed specifically to the city that had been their home for the entire competition. The statement expressed heartfelt appreciation to the wonderful people of Mexico, and specifically to the beautiful city of Tijuana. Leaving Tijuana is truly difficult for all of us, the statement read. Sit with that for a second. A team that had been denied a normal preparation window. A team whose own supporters had their tickets pulled days before kickoff. A team that had to cross an international border before and after every single match they played in this tournament. And in the moment their World Cup ended, on the cruelest possible scoreline, decided by a different match entirely, their public response was to thank the city that had taken them in. That's not the response of a team looking for sympathy or searching for someone to blame. That's the response of a group of people who understood, perhaps better than anyone else in this entire tournament, what it actually meant to be welcomed somewhere when so much else around them had been complicated and uncertain. It's worth comparing that emotional tone to what other teams experienced in the same World Cup. Just to put it in perspective, host city Arrowhead Stadium, home of the Kansas City Chiefs, had already seen its stands flooded with the blue of Argentina, the yellow of Ecuador, and the bright orange of the Netherlands across earlier matches in the tournament. Supporters traveling freely, settling in, filling stadiums with color and noise the way a World Cup is supposed to look. Iran's experience, by contrast, was defined by border crossings and short windows and a base camp in a different country altogether. And yet the gratitude in their final statement was completely unforced and completely genuine. So where does Iran's elimination actually leave this tournament? And what does it leave us with as a takeaway from one of the most talked about campaigns of the entire group stage? On the pure football side, Iran's coaching staff have been remarkably consistent in how they've described this campaign throughout. After the VAR call against Egypt, the verdict from inside Iran's camp was simple. We're an unlucky team. After Saturday's elimination, that same sentiment held. 3 draws, 0 defeats, a points total that in almost any other group at this World Cup might have been enough to advance. Eliminated anyway by the smallest of margins, in a match they weren't even playing in. For Algeria and Austria, the story is one of pure celebration. Algeria advances to the knockout rounds with that long-awaited measure of redemption against the same opponent who featured in their own complicated World Cup history 4 decades ago. Austria advances for the first time in over 40 years, setting up a knockout match against European champion Spain. For Iran, the tournament ends. But the way it ended and the way the squad chose to respond to it tells its own story, one that exists completely separate from the final group standings. A team that came into this World Cup facing logistical hurdles unlike any other nation in the competition. A team that fought through every one of those obstacles to still finish their group stage unbeaten. And a team that, in the final moment of their campaign, chose gratitude over grievance, thanking a city that had nothing to do with FIFA or politics or any of the complications that defined their tournament, simply for being a place where they were welcomed. What do you think? Should the tiebreaker rules at this tournament be reconsidered for situations like this, where a team's elimination hinges entirely on a match it has no part in? And what did you make of Iran's response to their own elimination, thanking Tijuana rather than focusing on everything else they had to overcome just to compete? Let me know in the comments. This is exactly the kind of story that reminds you football is never only about the scoreline. If you want to keep following the knockout rounds as this tournament moves forward, go ahead and subscribe.